price you pay to pursue your dreams. Grinding every day to get that dream. Ain't no holding back until you get your shot. One day you're gonna open your eyes and be on top. That's the price you pay to pursue your dreams. Grinding every day to get that dream. Ain't no holding back until you get your shot. One day you're gonna open your eyes and be on top. Been playing this game since I was 10 years of age. I wanted to make my mark ever since my Pop Warner days. When I strapped that helmet, I'm knocking dudes into a blaze. A lockdown corner going all the way through 7th and 8th grade. Entering high school, I'm ready to write another page. Busting my ass and lifting weights. It's a much higher level, but I'm still making plays. No time to party or bask in my glory days. It's college preparatory classes every single day. Living my life with that singular goal. It's the fire inside that makes me whole. Looking in the mirror, my muscles swole. I'm on a mission, and I'm never gonna stop. When the ball's in the air like Sherman, I'm a hawk. And I promise I'll overcome whatever life throws at me.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ageless Movement Podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Lohman.
I'm saying Wonak.
All right, so it's here, finally. We have our vaccines. I believe it was November 17th that both Pfizer and Moderna have now announced that they have vaccines. And what we want to do is sort of unpack what this means for all of us and maybe answer the questions that lead to more questions. Like, are these vaccines going to immunize us? And that's an interesting concept because when we think of vaccines, what's the main vaccine we always think of?
Polio.
Polio, thank you very much. Polio, right? And polio pretty much took care of everything in one shot. That was like a gift from God in a lot of ways. What?
Didn't some people get it anyway?
I don't think so. There were people that had side effects, but I don't think they got polio anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, we're not talking about discussing polio here today. We're discussing these two potential vaccines that are they're gonna bring to market very quickly here. And I believe April is going to be the first actual distribution. And of course, there's a lot of things that's going to happen between now and then. But we want to kind of dive into this and give you all some context to what it's going to mean in your life and how it relates to exercise and how we still need to be on guard, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so here we are. And excuse me if I'm disappearing on and off the screen a lot today. That's just how we have to do things here in our studio. Okay, I'm going to get out of the shot here so you can see the screen. All right, so what we have here initially, you have your Pfizer, you have your Moderna, and to answer your questions very quickly, first off, Pfizer is not a part of Operation Warp Speed, which is all of the federal funding that the Trump administration put forward on finding a vaccine. So you may want to scoot out a little bit there.
Yeah,
maybe.
and actually Moderna is also one that,
Is part of it, yeah.
Well, also they got a donation from Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
So,
So it was really brought to you by Dolly Parton.
It's $1 million. If you go read about it, they were super excited about getting that $1 million.
Another reason to love, I won't say it. Okay, now, looking at these two biotech companies here, the first thing you're going to most likely notice is the amount of time that these vaccines can stay viable for, given their respective temperatures here, okay? So, now here's the interesting thing. At 25 degrees Fahrenheit, the Pfizer vaccine only lasts 5 days. The Moderna vaccine lasts 1 month. So that's pretty impressive, I gotta say there. But keep in mind, it's not a simple thing where you could just walk into an office, get this injection. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be in place to preserve the vaccine itself, and that's gonna be quite expensive. They're gonna have some type of refrigeration system to do this, unless I guess you're in Minnesota, which is bloody cold there. Okay, now, how long do these vaccines last for in storage? So what we do know the Moderna lasts for 1 month. The Pfizer vaccine can last for 6 months. So that's good to know. But I can't imagine how you're going to sit on these things for that length of time. They're going to be used probably almost immediately upon shipment. Okay, now, you all know that both of these vaccines and other ones as well are going to require multiple inoculations. So there's going to be two injections on with the Pfizer vaccine. It's going to be on day 1, and then there's going to be 22 days before you get the second injection. Basically, the way these vaccines are going to work, if you have the Pfizer vaccine, it's going to be on day 1. You're going to get your first injection, and then on day 22, you get your second injection. And as far as the Moderna vaccine, day 1 you're going to get your first injection, and then day 29 you get your second injection. So it's interesting that there's almost a 7-day gap between the two. And then both companies reported side effects at day 7. And I'm sorry, one's at day 7, which is Pfizer, and then Moderna was 14 days. So that's quite a bit of time before you experience any sort of side effects to this drug. Anything you want to add to this, Sang?
No.
Okay, so later on, we're going to go to some of the other factors with these drugs. Let me just find the
we'll
page
actually drop the link of this particular YouTube, which is from medcram.com.
Yeah, there's a really good doctor that did this. Okay, so a lot of things to unpack here. So what they're claiming right now, and of course they still have to go through peer review on all this stuff. In fact, they're probably almost through peer review at this point, because a lot of this information we're reporting to you is based on last week. So Pfizer has a 90% effective rate against the vaccine, against the virus, and Moderna is at 94.5%. So those are really good numbers. I mean, if they really are going to be, if they're going to hold up through peer review, and then in reality be able to deliver this level of success, then that's going to be really, really amazing for us moving forward. Okay, now what you're probably wondering is, who was actually tested in all this? Now, we don't have all the information at this time on Pfizer, but Moderna actually did show quite a bit. So, what are we looking at here? We're looking at 30,000 people, okay? 11,000 of them were people of color. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is a really significant thing because so much of medical studies happen and they're mostly done on white males and white females. So when they say people of color here, I'm just going to assume this means African Americans, this means Asians, and probably Latinos as well. I would imagine there's a certain percentage of Pacific Islanders and everybody else in here. That's a good sign. 7,000 people were over age 65. And then 5,000 were under 65 that had comorbidities. And that, I would probably say obesity is a huge part of this statistic. Could be diabetes, and of course that oftentimes goes hand in hand. Could be heart disease and other things, asthma. That would all fit in this cohort right here. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, because a lot of you are probably a little bit antsy about potential side effects. I've had quite a bit of discussions with you saying about this, and with other people, and
probably mostly me.
Well, yes, mostly you. I mostly see you, but I have spoken with other people, and they are concerned about potential side effects. And the interesting thing here is, of the 30,000, and this is Moderna once again. Before we move on to talking about Moderna here, I do want to pivot to Pfizer once again. So Pfizer claims they had 0 severe cases, which sounds really encouraging. But that doesn't mean there isn't some pretty bad moderate ones, okay? Again, we don't know all the results of the peer review at this point, or what it's going to be until April when we get these injections. But so with Moderna, you had 95 people that experienced side effects. Now here's the interesting thing. They give you one group placebos, of course, it's a double-blind study, and then they give the other group the vaccine, and no one knows who had what. And there's actually an independent company that actually was involved in this process here. It wasn't actually Moderna's company itself testing this out. Okay, so of the 95 people that were given either the placebo or the vaccine, there were 95 people that experienced side effects, all right? 90 of the 95 people were given placebos. And only 11 of those people taking the placebos had moderate to severe side effects, okay? Now, only 5 people, I believe only 5 people had a response to the side effects that were actually given the vaccine. So again, those are pretty encouraging numbers, and you would expect that with 30,000 people getting this vaccine, you would think at least 300 would have some type of side effect that might be moderate, possibly severe. And we're not seeing that so far. Okay, so any thoughts on this? Go ahead, sit down. Let's begin the discussion.
Also seems to be...
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. All right, so there's a lot to unpack in that question. So first of all, what we don't know from all this early data is that do these vaccines in fact prevent the spread of the coronavirus? We don't know that. But the encouraging side of this is we do know it's a great treatment for the potential effects of the infection, meaning the cytokine storm, which leads to difficulty breathing, all the myriad amount of side effects you've heard, headaches, massive fatigue. I mean, the list goes on. I've never seen a virus that has so many potential side effects as COVID-19. So we know this can treat all of those side effects and prevent death to a very high degree of between 90 and 95%. Okay, that's great. But do we know that it prevents the spread of the infection among other people? We don't know that yet. So, any thoughts on that?
I think in general, it just there's no magic bullet.
Well, we're not suggesting there is a magic bullet.
I just feel a lot of people have a lot of hopes tied into
that
all
is
of
true.
this. I mean, like, because we have this discussion, and I gave my reasons to Scott, and then that's when he was like, "Here, watch this." Okay, so it made me feel a little better, but like when you talk about these numbers, I'm like, okay, that's nice. They've like reached out to a big group of people of, from different backgrounds. But I think bottom line here is, like, when you look at these comorbidities, like, none of us know if we even fall into this category.
That is true, but to be honest, they're not going to release that stuff right now until there's been a peer review. Mm-hmm. And the peer review is independent, right? Mm-hmm. Because here's the thing. If other medical organizations are involved in the peer review, their integrity's on the line. So if there's something in here that isn't represented in terms of cohorts or conditions, and they don't mention that it's not in there, then their integrity is nothing at that point. And these are companies that are, basically that's what they do.
Right.
They review vaccines and drugs, and if they don't have any integrity at all, then the whole thing just comes tumbling down. So that's why we do need to wait for the peer review and see, what some of the other companies are saying. But if this is true, this is very encouraging, because we're going to be able to slow the death rate down dramatically. the side effects of it, maybe even speed up the time of recovery, and that means less time missed for work for most people. But as it stands right now, and I don't think we're going to know this until we give people the vaccine, we don't know if this is going to prevent the spread of the virus. And again, it goes back to what we're saying here. You need to stay vigilant. You need to wear a mask. You need to bring your hand sanitizer with you. Wash your hands. Stay clean. Keep your hygiene at a very high level. That is not going to change. However, this vaccine plus smart hygiene and decisions could eradicate the virus. It's possible. The other question is, how is this going to affect people, with say multiple comorbidities? So you have somebody with heart disease that's maybe overweight. Well, if you've been reading about a lot of the literature that's been coming out on COVID, being obese really, really makes you high risk because the virus actually uses your adipose tissue, your fat, as a lifeline into your body. It's disturbing, but that's essentially what it does. Now, what's really interesting about these vaccines is they're called mRNA, and that just means messenger RNA. And what they basically do is they go in, if you could imagine for a second, let me see if I can find, he had a good diagram of this, but essentially you don't attack the nucleus, you attack the protein of the virus itself. And see, the H protein is actually the problem with this whole entire virus, because within the ACE proteins, they mutate all the time. And this is why it's very difficult to actually receive any long-term immunity from this, because it's generally 3 months worth. So what messenger RNA does is it goes into the cell itself and attacks the protein. And by attacking that protein, it actually destroys the virus itself. And that's essentially how it does it. That's a very dumbed down, easy explanation for what it does. But we're not scientists here, and you would probably want to consult with a doctor that will explain this whole process in and out. But that's essentially what it does. It attacks the ACE proteins on the virus itself, and that, in a sense, weakens the virus and it dies. So I'm hopeful that we're on our way to something special here, to where we can actually get back to living a normal life again. Not anytime soon, of course. Remember, the earliest these vaccines are going to get to the market is going to be in April. Now, I think we should talk about the other bigger question here is, obviously, the most important thing is to stay vigilant and also to stay healthy. Make sure your body composition is low as possibly. Well, maintain your body composition is a better way to say it, if it's not out of control already. The other thing is, of course, what goes along with that is your fitness level. Try to stay as strong and healthy as possible. Maintain your strength, increase it if you can. Same thing with cardiovascular fitness. Focus on your fitness now. This is your best defense, along with smart hygiene, like we mentioned earlier.
But there's also how you take care of yourself, like having enough rest.
Yes,
and making
sleep.
Sure that it's high quality rest, and not just I turned off the light at this hour and then I tossed and turned for most of that. The other thing is that you're eating properly, you're managing stress. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of the clients that come to me, they're like, I still want to be able to drink. I still want to eat anything I want. And, and they think oh, I go exercise and everything's good. I'm checked that box. But it's like, well, what was, even your exercise, what quality was that at? Because if you just went for 15 reps and kind of hung out, and I don't really know how much that's going to help either.
So we're right back to what we've been discussing. More fitness, right?
Yeah.
Quality of fitness. Trying to push yourself to a point of where there's some exertion.
Yes.
And we're not suggesting pushing yourself to the point of where there's too much exertion. We're saying stay in the margins, but get yourself towards the margin.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, so many times I have people come to class and their weights, I'm like, I know your handbag weighs more than that. So I'm not sure why you're only working with 3 pounds, 5 pounds, what have you. Unless this is your like third workout of the day, then I'm not sure.
So that's a good point. And it just, I know we're circling our wagons here again, but we're back to what we've been discussing for the whole length of our podcast series here. Is take care of yourself, stay healthy. These things are really, really important. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, people ask me this question back in the summer, actually, June and July. When do you think we're going to have a vaccine? And of course, you know, our president was claiming it's going to come any day now. You know, we heard a lot of that, a lot of promises, but, you know, knowing what I've read about pharmaceutical companies and how long it takes to bring a vaccine, especially a vaccine, not just a drug, but a vaccine to market, it takes a long time. Especially, you have to go through all the 3 stages, and you can only rush those so much. People were literally had to be working around the clock on this to bring anything to market in this time. Now, I predicted that the very earliest we would see anything would be April through June. And it looks like this is what's happening. April. My best case scenario that people ask me what could potentially happen with a vaccine is actually happening. It's in April. So this is encouraging, and I think the way you should view this, with optimism, with light at the end of the tunnel, but it should be motivation for you to keep doing what you're doing, which is what we just mentioned. Taking care of your health and fitness, making sure you have good hygiene, staying away from large groups of people, you know the rest, right? Continue that, but you should continue it knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, where up until a few weeks ago, everyone's just like, I can't take it anymore. Yeah, so this should be encouraging. This should help relieve some of your cabin fever. But honestly, you know, if you're going crazy in your house, go outside. Wear a mask. You can go for a bike ride. You can go for a walk. You can go for a hike. And if a lot of you are complaining that you don't like wearing your mask, well, if there's no people around, you can just wear the mask around your neck or put it in your pocket. And if you see somebody or a group of people, put the mask on and go around them. Or if someone, a neighbor or somebody you would like to have a conversation with, put the mask on, maintain 10 feet, you'll be fine. People are proving that you could actually not catch this virus by just making smart decisions. Now look, there's a chance anyone can get this. If there's anything we've learned from 2020, yes, anyone can get this virus, even if you're taking the right precautions. But you have to understand, a lot of the people that have contracted this have really not taking the right steps to protect themselves. Or you're a frontline worker and you're constantly, and that's the other piece of research in all this, or data I should say, is that the amount of exposure does have an effect on the percentage of you getting this virus and even the severity of it. We've seen some horrible symptoms with healthcare workers themselves. And they're around at pretty much 8 to 10 hours a day. It's a lot different than you going to a grocery store, getting your food and leaving, as opposed to treating people you know have this virus. And Sang even was in a situation where she entered an assisted living place where there was a COVID wing, although she didn't visit the COVID wing, but she did take all the precautions, wore the gown, wore all the PPE, which included the mask, the face shield, and everything else.
Which I asked for. Like I had to take a class, which was fine. I took the class, and then she's like, okay, you can go in now. And I was like, well, wait, where's my gear? And she's like, oh, you don't need that. You need that for the other wing. And I'm like, no. I will take all the gear that you can offer. I was the first person to actually go through this protocol. And, you know, I did it so that I could see my dad. And I think that's one of the hardest things in this time period is that you can't. I mean, when I called, they were like, well, yes, but you're making me jump through all these hoops that I don't know if I can or not. And I'm pretty sure this is my last year seeing my dad. And so I went through that, did everything. I mean, Scott helped me find a place to get a COVID test. And I literally made every marker, like, just in time. I mean, I wasn't even sure if I was going to get my test back in time, because everybody's like, oh, you won't get a test back for like a week. And I had literally 3 days, because I was flying out, you know, and even that was quite the experience. And I've kind of laughed at it in past podcasts about how serious things are, and like, I just wear my mask all the time. I sanitize like crazy no matter what's going on. I carry my wipes everywhere I go. But I had to do all of that just so that I could go in and see my dad. And even that experience for somebody who's 91 with dementia, I mean, he's literally looking at me, and that's always the big thing is when will my dad not remember who I am? And I walked in there, and he kind of looked at me like, you look familiar, but why are you in this weird garb? And it's just so funny, because in his very simple terms was, there's something wrong with your eyes. It's like, yes, Dad, I know, but this is the way things are for now, because, you know, I have to help protect you, and I have to protect myself. And, you know, and it's because he's looking at the goggles and the face shield, like, I know you, but you look weird.
Yeah.
You know, but I was willing to do all of that to, you know, in hopes that, you know, that could have been the last time I ever hugged him. And to me, it was worth it. And I did everything I could. I came back and took tests.
So yeah, you had a COVID test the week before, and then you had another one.
Or 10 days later.
10 days later.
I went in again and took another one.
Was negative. So she was able to prevent herself from getting COVID in a place that did have a lot of COVID. Now, keep in mind, she went to the wing that didn't have COVID, active COVID cases, I should say.
But my dad in the past has tested positive.
He did test positive for it. He was asymptomatic, fortunately for him.
I asked repeatedly, like, where he stood in that, you know, and basically in the cycle, and I didn't get a very clear answer. So I took a lot of chances. I'm not saying, and not that I recommend it to anybody, but you have to make your own choices, and you have to decide what you're willing to deal with. So I think every step of the way, everything is a decision you make for yourself, and you just have to live with the outcome. So if you decide to eat something, or you decide not to work out, you have to be okay with those decisions.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
I mean, it's the same thing with this vaccine. I mean, because we're battling back and forth. I think one night on the recliners, we were literally battling. We're just like, well, how about this and how about that? And, you know, because we're kind of on two different ends of the spectrum for different reasons. You know, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so for the record, Sang's a little bit pessimistic of the vaccines, and not only the effectiveness, but also whether or not they're going to be able to be a solution long term. I think they're going to save a lot of lives. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, we may end up running through the same course of actions that we've been running through. We're going to have to continue to stay vigilant, and it's just going to come down to getting those numbers down low enough to where they're not going to negatively impact our day-to-day life. And people have asked me about this, you know, how long do I think it's going to go for? You know, like I said, these vaccines can prevent the spread, and we should be in like Flynn. But if they don't, then you're still going to be in a situation where you don't want to spread this. But the good news is, if you do have the vaccine, you know you stand a good chance, a 90% chance of surviving this.
But even then, what does survival look like? Because that's the
Nerve
discussion
damage.
we had last week. So it is a lot to unpack.
There is a lot to unpack, and yeah, there is the potential for nerve damage. really resulting from the inflammation in the body and the brain. We've seen this with a lot of overweight people, the myocarditis. We saw this with college football players. And I'd mentioned this, I think, in previous podcasts. You know, some of the offensive linemen are between 3 and, I kid you not, 380 pounds. You're going to be a lot more at risk for myocarditis and inflammation if you're just that large of a body. Not that I'm suggesting we all are, but this is another category.
You have an active lifestyle.
Yeah, but here's the thing, you have to factor in. These are athletes that are pushed to the max. Obviously, a lot of them are on chemical enhancement. They're probably weighing about 60 to 80 pounds more than they would have weighed if they weren't. They're at high risk. When you carry all that extra weight like that, it puts you at risk. So these are all things to take into consideration in regard to how you approach COVID and your health. So yeah, if there's ever been a time to take your health seriously, it's now. And there's good news. Now here's the other thing I wanted to mention before we kind of wrap things up here today. There are other competing vaccines that are out there. AstraZeneca is supposed to come out pretty soon, and Johnson & Johnson. So they're in their late stage 3s right now. So who knows, maybe these vaccines are going to be even more effective or maybe less effective. But either way, it's nice to know they're working around the clock. Now, the other question, and we've been discussing this for quite some time, is how are we going to pay for all of this? For those of you that aren't familiar, we can kind of discuss that very briefly. You have a lot of federal money that was signed into law by Congress and authorized by the federal government and the Trump administration, which is Operation Warp Speed, where they put a lot of money and billions in all these biotech companies to try to get them to develop a vaccine as quickly as possible. Now, it doesn't mean that every one of these companies were a part of Operation Warp Speed. Pfizer was not, but Moderna is. So, yeah, Gilead, of course. Now, that's the surprising thing. I really thought Gilead would be the first company to come to market because they reported, I guess about a month ago, that they were getting towards the later stages of stage 3. And interestingly enough, Pfizer and Moderna beat them. So, it's very difficult to predict these sort of things. You never know how quickly they're going to complete their studies. And again, we're not going to know long term the effects of these vaccines because we're on the short term and we're trying to get these out to people to save lives. No question about it. We don't know. But I think you're better off being optimistic and motivated to keep doing what you're doing. And hopefully, I just have a feeling that by the end of the summer into the fall, or maybe even into the spring of 2021, this may be getting into our rearview mirror. But you have to understand something. Pandemics, by and large, have about a 2-year shelf life on them anyway, because they either they run out of people to infect in 2 years, or the population that's infected figures out how to prevent infections. And then the virus dies, burns out. So the Spanish flu was basically a 2-year pandemic. And the second wave was actually worse than the first wave. Because some towns and cities actually prepared quite well, others did not. San Francisco was one town that actually fared quite well during the first wave of the Spanish flu. And the main reason why was they took a look around and saw some of the other communities that were infected first, like Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was one of the cities that really got decimated from the Spanish flu, mostly because they didn't prepare. And the main reason why they didn't prepare, the mayor of Philadelphia actually held a parade. I didn't mean to say a march, a parade. Well, I guess you march in a parade. Yeah, it was a parade, and he was up for re-election, and his own health experts told him, we highly advise you not to hold this parade because you're going to put people at risk. It was late fall, and it was getting cold. It was in November, and of course, he did it anyway, and a lot of spectators reported that there was a lot of sneezing and coughing, and literally within weeks there were thousands and thousands of people dying. And the scary part about how they about that situation was a lot of the frontline workers were the victims of all of this. They got sick treating the sick. So we all need to do our part. And I say this with all of my heart: do your part so people that are higher risk are safe. And on a more macro level, do this for businesses out there so they can open up again, so we can function as an economy, because this is the other part of a pandemic, is the free fall economy that follows with it, right? If the infection's if the virus is so bad, people can't be around each other, it's awful hard to run businesses. So do your part, and it's going to help everyone. The people that are high risk with health problems, and it's also going to help people stay in business, because that's the other health aspect of this: the depression, the having to file bankruptcy, people that lose their job and can't afford their Cobra payments anymore. You go look at the Labor Department. 27 million people have applied, 30 million people have applied for unemployment benefits. Before the pandemic, 27 million people didn't have health insurance. So you got to think, of that 30 million that don't have health insurance, at least 15 million are going to be in the tenuous situation of having to decide, okay, what do I pay for? My mortgage, my food, or my Cobra payments. Now, Cobra is really expensive, and Cobra essentially is basically your employer-based health care that you lose when you're laid off, that you can pay to keep your health insurance, but it's extraordinarily high. And to give you some idea how high it is, when I was teaching for Foothill College and I got laid off in June of 2010, I had to go on Cobra for 18 months. That's before the Affordable Health Care Act went into effect, which I think went into effect in 2012, if I'm correct. And in fact, I know, because I tried to negotiate my own health insurance deal with Kaiser, and of course I was rejected because I'm considered to have two comorbidities, which is asthma and acid reflux. And truthfully, I've never been hospitalized for asthma, but I have been hospitalized for acid reflux. But the last time was 2005. So again, I figured out how to take care of myself. Now, of those people, back to the point here, you just have to assume at least 15 million of these people are going to go, okay, what are the most important things that I need to pay for? Mortgage, food, I guess I can't afford my Cobra. Now that's going to cause an incredible strain on our healthcare system. If there's anything that this virus has done, it's pointed out the absolute holes we have in our healthcare system, and really our government's response for people that are in dire situations, which include the economics end of this as well. So we all need to do our part, which is to minimize the rate of this infection, to not allow ourselves to be another host for this virus, so that when we do get these vaccines and they are effective, we can function as human beings, be healthy again, and have a healthy economy as well, which is really important for people's mental health and their physical health as well. Our government has failed us. There's no question about it. We don't do politics on this channel and this podcast, but I will say this was a massive failure of epic levels. And hopefully we'll learn from this in the future and be prepared, because other pandemics are a possibility. Okay, anything else you want to add, say? All right, everyone. Take care. Take care of yourselves. Take care of everyone else. Let's do our part, and we'll see you in a week. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. The other thing that's nice about this podcast is we're not shameless self-promoters. Like, I don't even mention till the end of the video to like the video and subscribe. Everyone else you watch on YouTube, that's the first thing they tell you. All right? Okay, everyone, we'll see you in a week.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Take care.